Genesis 45:25. And they went up out of Egypt and came into the land of Canaan unto Jacob their father, and told him, saying, Joseph is yet alive, and he is governor over all the land of Egypt. And Jacob's heart fainted, for he believed them not. And they told him all the words of Joseph, which he had said unto them. And when he saw the wagons, which Joseph had sent to carry him, the spirit of Jacob their father revived. And Israel said, It is enough. Joseph my son is yet alive. I will go and see him before I die. The topic or subject that occupies my mind primarily is the expression in verse 28. Israel said, It is enough. But if I may go ahead a little before that, I would like to look at what transpired. It says, And Israel took his journey with all that he had. I have long been an advocate of emphasizing the exactness of the Bible. We either believe the Bible is inspired or it is not. I believe it is. Now someone say, well, what you have here is a translation. Well, it may be a translation. But if it's translated like God predestinated it to be translated. Have no problem with that. It said Israel took his journey. It was his to take. And I'm satisfied he had it to take. And I'm satisfied he was made willing to take it. And that he took it on time. And that he didn't get lost. And that he arrived where he was supposed to arrive. And God controlled and superintended the whole affair. And it all worked together for good. Not just for old Israel, but for his children, for Joseph, for all of his family, and for us today. For all things work together for good to them that love God. If we're blessed to be among those that love God, what Jacob did also works together for our good. It said, and Israel took his journey. I use an expression quite a bit. Who would have thought it? This was the last thing this old man would have imagined he was going to do in his final years. He had traversed the land that God had given Abraham and Isaac before him. Traveled it up and down, even been back to the land of his fathers, and took a wife. Took several wives. Sojourned with his uncle Laban and crossed back over the river and back into the land and up and down and about. And Jacob was a man of many trials and conflicts. The blessed thing is God was with him in all of it. He was never forsaken. But it didn't turn out often like he anticipated it. Could we not say that our life is much that way? We set our course, fix our charts and all, and somehow or another we don't wind up where and when as we had thought or anticipated or planned. But he took his journey, and he took it with all he had. This is, as old Brother John Lee used to say, lock, stock, barrel, hook, line, and sinker. The whole package he was going. When God calls these people, he doesn't call Adam, doesn't call them in part, doesn't send them and say, now, I'm not going to let you have this or that. All that was his, he was able to retain. Nothing is lost. What was the first thing we see that he does as he takes his journey? It says he comes to Beersheba. I might turn back just a little bit in the book of Genesis if I can find the text. I believe it's in Genesis 21 or somewhere thereabout. Genesis 21, verse 33. And Abraham planted a grove in Beersheba and called there on the name of the Lord, the everlasting God. The father of the nation planted a grove at Beersheba. And there he called upon the everlasting God, signifying the union between this family and the everlasting, the eternal God, the great I am. And so when Isaac, his son, and Jacob, his grandson following him, are about to embark on journeys of significance, they follow in the pattern of Abraham. And at this time, he goes to the same place Abraham does, and there he offers sacrifices unto the God of his father, Isaac. And God spake unto Israel in the visions of the night. I don't put much stock in dreams. I've had some last few nights that were so ramblingly-fied and confused that if I was to tell a psychiatrist, he'd probably go crazy. I don't know anything about visions. But I know that in the Bible there were those that God came to in visions. What form it took place and why God was pleased to do it this way, I don't know. But that's the way it was. And when God came to him, he used his name Jacob, not Israel. You will notice back in the verses I read earlier, the spirit of Jacob, their father, revived, and Israel said, it is enough. Is there any significance there? I believe there is. Jacob had two names. He was originally Jacob, the supplanter. God changed his name and called him Israel. In some interpretations, he's a prince with God. And it sort of identifies Jacob, like all of the elect family, as being two people instead of one. There's this old natural Jacob. And there is this spiritual Israel. And we see them working together and apart at the same time. Now in the visions of the night, God spake to Israel, and yet he said, Jacob, Jacob. Called him by his natural name. And he used it 2, not 1 time. I think I've mentioned this to you many times before, several anyway, that this should have some great significance. When you read the Bible, how many times do you think you will find somebody being called of God and their name being used 2 times? Jacob, Jacob. Well, I believe in the Old Testament there was 4 times this occurred, but 3 besides Jacob. Abram, Abram. Moses, Moses. Samuel, Samuel. In the New Testament, there were 3 times. Martha, Martha. Simon, Simon. Saul, Saul. Now when you go back and look at those names and those circumstances, see the similarity in how and when God called them. But at any rate, he did. Jacob, Jacob, and he said, here am I. What else would he have said? Have you heard people say that God calls at his children? They don't say that exactly. What they say is, God is softly and tenderly calling. Sinner, come home. Well, it may be softly and tenderly, but you may rest assured of this, that if God calls, all that he has called will and shall answer. Not a one of them will renege, or back out, or say no. When God calls, he calls because it's his pleasure to call, and he has never failed in an attempt, if we may say, to call one of his children. They shall ever, one like sheep, hear the voice of the good shepherd, and when they hear, they shall say, much like Jacob did, here am I. Not here I go, but here am I. They've been made to stand still to see the salvation of the Lord. And he said, this is not Jacob talking, this is God. And he said, I am God. Is there a 92nd ounce of ambiguity in that? I am God. If God comes to a poor sinner that he's created out of the dust of this earth and says, I am God, do you think the poor fella is not going to recognize him? Do you believe for one instant that he will spurn him? That he will say, I've not got time for you? Or that other matters are more pressing? Or that can you come back at some more convenient moment? Or who are you to interfere with my civil rights? Or whatever. Rest assured of this, the God that speaks to the Jacobs of this world identifies himself, and when he does, they know who it is, and they are made submissive and willing in the day of his power. They are bowed down, and they long to hear what he has to say, because what he has to say is of great moment to them. Somehow, in our lives, we learn to appreciate the importance of what might be called tonality. I think that's the word. I'm not much on big words. Well, how do you all expect to know what I'm talking about if I don't? What I mean by this is, it's not often what people say. It's the tone or the manner they say it. I can recall as a little fella, I'm sure you all have, Mama might want me. I'm outside somewhere. Say, Jimmy, where are you? I didn't pay any attention to her. I just kept on playing. But if she stuck her head out the door and said something to the effect, "You've got just about 30 seconds," I understood that tone. And there was no carrying. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Mama or daddy can tell a child, "No." And the child goes right on about his little ornery business. But sometimes mama or daddy can say no with some kind of emphasis, or maybe a little glitter in their eye or something, or the hand draws back, and things take on a different perspective. God always uses, in His infinite wisdom, all that is necessary, no more and no less, to have the attention of His children to the fullest. If He has a message to give to the children will be prepared. They will be situated, and they will respond exactly as God has intended it to come to pass. I am God. Notice the I am, and we could dwell on that if time permitted. The God of thy fathers. Well, this would have been a good time for Him to have said, "I'm everybody's God." We'll not dwell on that. But then He tells him, in words so unmistakable, the wayfarer could see it, "Fear not to go down into Egypt." Jacob wasn't looking to go to Egypt. Hadn't made no plans to go. This was remote from his mind. But God tells him, "Fear not to go down to Egypt." And notice he had to go down. Egypt, the last place he wanted to be. But God said there is no need fearing. In fact, He said it more than that. Fear not. Now, do you believe Jacob's going to quit fearing or not? When the Lord spoke to His little children, He said, "Fear not, little flock." And they didn't fear anymore, at least not in that setting. Fear not to go down into Egypt. Read something just the other day that startled me about as bad as anything I'd ever read in regard to this. Would you think that anyone that claimed that God was God could say that old Jacob and the famine, Pharaoh and Joseph and all of the rest caught God off guard, and He had to change His course of action in order to bring things up to snuff? You say, "Where did you read that? In some Armenian paper?" No. Wasn't anything quite that obvious. I'm holding before you what says the Holy Bible. It says also the Schofield Reference Edition, Oxford. Now, I've been using this same kind of Bible since 1957 when I bought my first one. Not because I thought this was the best one there was, but because the one I bought at the time, and I know where to find things in it. And I've seen some little notes in here that I thought was kind of bad. But I just X them out and write like I do here, bunk, and go on. Because what I'm interested in is what the "Thus saith the Lord" has to say here. But you've got to hear this. Here's what Mr. Schofield said about Jacob and his journey. Now, he put this in print and signed his name to it. It is important to distinguish between the directive and the permissive will of God. Now, I didn't know God had two wills, but He thinks He does. The directive and the permissive will of God. In the first sense, the place for the covenant family was Canaan. Genesis 46 is a touching instance of the permissive will of God. Jacob's family broken and in part already in Egypt, the tenderness of Jehovah would not forbid the aged patriarch to follow. Had other plans for him, but He wouldn't forbid him to go on down there, is what He said. God will take up His people, and so far as possible. Oh, that's heart-rending, isn't it? Just as far as possible, God's going to do something. As far as He can, is what He said. Bless them even when they are out of His best. Now I'll tell you what, you are either in His best or you're out of it. And He only has one quality. This is not like buying firsts and seconds and thirds and so forth at some warehouse sale. God don't have best and less than best and worst and all of that. Everything God has is His best. Nevertheless, go back here. It is needless to say that God's permissive will never extends to things morally wrong. The highest blessing is ever found in obedience to His directive will. Now, if you all was to decipher that, what it amounts to is this. God got caught off guard. And God had to alter the circumstances. And God had to move because Jacob had first moved. And as a result, Jacob was out of God's best, so He gave me second best. That is the highlight of heresy. Now, I don't say that just to drag in something here to be saying, but to point out to you the mental unawareness that man has towards the holy will and purpose of God. The reason that Jacob is going down to Egypt is because God had from eternity past always predestinated that His people go there. Let me remind you that in the New Testament it speaks of God having brought His Son up out of Egypt. And that's just as much the inspired Word of God as this is right here. How could God have ever planned to bring His Son up out of Egypt if His Son had never gone down into Egypt? He had to go to Egypt just as much as Adam had to fall in the garden. These things weren't coincidences or things that slipped up on the holy plan of God. They were the will and the mind and the purpose of God to bring to pass a nation of people developed and fully matured at the proper time for Him to deliver back into Canaan, the land of promise. And it come to pass just like God wanted it. And this wasn't no second best. Let me tell you about second best. When we moved to Salisbury some years ago, right down there off of Main Street, around the corner from the theaters there was about a 4-story looking old dilapidated building. They're still there. Had a big sign on it that says second best. I didn't know what they was talking about. Come to find out it's where people went to buy second best cloths and sheets and towels and dresses and I don't know what all. Some people say they got some bargains there. Second best. Well, second best is closed now. They don't even exist. First best is still around. I don't know who they are. What I'm trying to say is God has only one quality, and it is perfect, and it is essential, and it is right, and it's what He gives His children in Jesus Christ, His Son, and you need not worry about getting a second best or a quality defect or anything else. For I will there make of thee a great nation. Where is He going to make a great nation of him at? In Egypt, that's where. Did God change His mind? Did He alter His purpose? No. If He said, I will there make of thee a great nation, He had always from eternity planned to make His nation right there in Goshen. I will go down with thee into Egypt. Do you believe there's any contradictions in the Bible, Brother Frank? One or two, maybe? None, all right. I believe it was the old prophet Amos said this. Can two walk together except they be agreed? Except they be agreed. There is no way two can walk together except they be agreed. All right. I will go down with thee into Egypt. They're going together. Then they must be agreed. Then God must be pleased for Jacob to go or He wouldn't be going. And Jacob must be pleased to go or he wouldn't be going with God. Can you not see that they were agreed, and if agreed from all eternity? For God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Jacob may not be. But God has always been agreed, else they would not have ever gone to begin with. And I will also surely bring thee up again. Provided, of course, that Pharaoh don't get in the way. Provided, of course, that you would be willing and that I don't interfere with any of your plans. And the fact of the matter is, isn't it, that over a period of time in the land of Egypt, that God was pleased to raise up another king that knew not Joseph, and brought hard and severe trials upon the people, and made them cry, and made them groan, and willing to have the God of their fathers come back once again and dwell in their presence and raise up a deliverer and take them out of that land as a beautiful and a glorious illustration of God delivering His children from the sins of this Egypt world into a heaven above and beyond. And Joseph shall put his hands upon thine eyes. I've said all that just kind of an introduction to our text, just to show you the context there. And Israel said it's enough. What's contained in those words? Well, here come his sons back from Egypt. You know the story. And they've got good news. Oh, what good news it was. These rascals that sold to Brother Joseph assumed him dead and cared nothing for it. And what do they discover in the land of Egypt? But here is Joseph, their long-lost brother, and he's the governor of the whole world. He's the governor, moreover, of their lives and of their fates and of their destinies. The very breath they breathe is contingent upon Joseph's will. And Joseph, rather than showing wrath and a desire for reprisal or punishment, Joseph has only love for his brethren. He reaches out to them in compassion when they're yet ignorant of what's going on and says, I am Joseph, your brother. Is my father yet alive? And all the tenderness that took place when he forgave them freely and with compassion forgave them and embraced them and wept together upon their necks and lavished gifts upon them. This was not lost upon these brethren. There had been a change come over them unknown to anything they could have ever dreamed of. We've sinned against Him, and He's saved us. And He loves us. Is that not a beautiful figure? But to leave all of that, here they are going home. They have this story to tell their father. Now, Daddy Jacob believes Joseph is dead. Why? Because the brethren had come to him with evidence that he was dead. The coat of many colors, spattered and torn, blood all over it. Daddy, here it is. A wild beast has taken it. He believes Jacob's dead. They come back and say Joseph is yet alive. And he believed them not. He couldn't believe their words. I've recited these things enough to you. I need not go into it again, except to say this. You don't believe. You don't believe anything without some sort of evidence. You say, oh, I accept things on faith. Well, you say you do. What did Paul write to the Hebrews about faith? Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not yet seen. You accept things on faith, it's because the faith itself is the evidence. When God gives His children faith to believe something, that is evidence. Now these Israelite sons here come back from Egypt, though, with more than words. Words aren't going to do it. They've got evidence. They have got evidence of an overwhelming nature. Now Jacob had been a sojourner, traveled all of his life, up and down, in and out, wandered about. He was a man of some wealth and substance. He had camels, he had asses, he had oxen, he had wives, sons, and daughters, prominence, power. He pretty well had it all. And he had to know how to take care of it for the most part. But something else entered his life here, the likes of which he had never seen. Listen to the verse again. And they told him all the words of Joseph, which he had said unto them, and, that's conjunction, connection. And when he saw the wagons, which Joseph had sent to carry him, the spirit of Jacob their father revived. The words didn't carry any weight by themselves. But the words with an evidence unlike any evidence this man had ever witnessed before put the two together, and he had to come to the conclusion, based upon the holy will of God for it to be so, that this was actual. And when he saw the wagons which Joseph had sent to carry him, he saw something here unlike anything that these boys could have dreamed up. They might contrive the coat of many colors with the blood and the tears on it. They might contrive lies. But they could not have gone into Egypt as poor shepherds from a famished Canaan and come back with the great wagons of Pharaoh himself. Wagons of splendor. Wagons unlike any had ever seen in that land before, of magnitude beyond comprehension, loaded down with good things, money and gold and silver and precious foods for a starving people. All of this was an evidence that overwhelmed this man. And his words were simple. It's enough. You don't need to add anything to it. All that you've said was empty. But I see the evidence. It's enough. This, I think, is where the children of God come in all of their experiences of a spiritual nature. When the words of our Joseph come into our heart, and he brings us the witness of the wagons of our travels and journeys and so forth to us, we must conclude it's enough. It's not too little and we're having to really muster up belief. It's not too much and overwhelms us. You've heard the old saying, you can give a man so much light you can blind him. In natural senses, that's so. You take somebody been in a dungeon for years and fling open the doors and the sunlight shine down on him, he'd cover his eyes, wouldn't he? Bring him out gradually. We used to say in the theological schools that you could do that, give a man so much light you could blind him. Well, I'm not quite so sure about that. God gave Saul of Tarsus enough light to blind him for 3 days and nights, but he gave him his sight back. But when God comes to his little children with a revelation, with a course of action, with an unfolding of his eternal purposes, to set before them the open door to Egypt or wherever it might be, to deliver them alive, safe and sound with all that they have, to call them both Jacob, Jacob, and Israel together, to show them that he's taken the compound man and not the old Adamic man, but the whole man, and bring him and deliver him safely. He will provide him with wagons or evidences or proofs that cannot be disputed. And every one of them, whether it's Betty Tillman or Billy Davis or whoever it is, when God works in such a fashion, they can only say this: it's enough. When Abraham was sent to Moriah and told to slay his son there, he didn't have any evidence at the time of deliverance. He had evidence that God sent him. Ready to draw back the knife and has it raised to slay his son. And God calls him and shows him the ram caught in the thicket. And there he was made, not in the same words, but to say, it's enough. God has handled this very well, both to my good and his glory. Think of Ruth gleaning in the vineyards in a strange land. Boaz says, leave her out some hands full of purpose. She gleans and goes home, tells Naomi of this great blessing. And they mutually come to the same conclusion, though not the same word. It's enough. This matter's going to fall out good. Down through the Bible you might go. Find them one by one or hundreds by hundreds. Think even one who used the words identically. Poor old Elijah. Almost thought there said poor old Kalijah. I used to sing that song so much, but we're not talking about Kalijah. We're talking about poor old Elijah. Here he goes up to Mount Carmel and he defies King Ahab. Slays 400 of the prophets and derelict religionists of the day. God delivers his sacrifice in a mighty way and routs the priest of unholiness. Elijah gets word that this old painted and pompous Jezebel was out for his hide. And instead of him walking in the same faith that he had when he was on the mount, see, all the blessings of that moment are gone. He's bereft of those things, and he takes out in fear. And he goes back into the desert places. And he sits down under the juniper tree, and he wants to die. What does he say? He says, it's enough. He has seen all the evidence that he needs to see, that his old miserable existence is over. But you see, he was looking at the wrong evidence to say it's enough. When the Lord come to him to show him the proper evidence, the true evidence that there was a ministry yet for him to perform, to pass the mantle on to Elisha and so on, God comes to him with a still small voice and speaks to him in the whispering yet thundering tones to his soul, and he was satisfied then that it's enough, all right, but it wasn't what I thought it was. God's children shall be made to say, it's enough. We don't want anything else. I've had people look at me and say, don't you believe that such and such? No, I don't. Well, what about so-and-so? No, I don't. Are you satisfied with what you... Yes, I am. In other words, I can say, it's enough. I'll conclude, but I want to give you a little personal experience. The other afternoon, two nice-looking, well-dressed young gentlemen come to my door. Knew what they was before they got there. They're Mormons. Now, some of you would ill-treat a Mormon or a Jehovah's Witness when they come to your door. I don't. Whether they know the truth or whether they're in error, I can remember when I was as ignorant as they were, and I may be worse yet. I don't give them too much time, but I try to treat them courteously and thank them for having a concern for me. They talked on a moment. They said, where do you go to church? And I told them the old school. And I said, I believe my King James Version of the Bible is sufficient. Well, we have the Book of Mormon to go with with the Bible, and we know it's the truth. And all I could tell them was politely, I don't believe it to be the truth. In other words, what I was saying to them was, it's not enough for you to say so. You telling me it's the truth don't bear witness to me. For me to say it is enough is to have the evidences such as comport to what this book corresponds to, the experience I've had. When I may find myself sinking down like Peter in the water and cry, Lord, save me. And the Lord delivers me from the tempest and the waves and the storms, I can say then it's enough. I don't need anything else. No additions. No compromises. Bid those things farewell. God's children have every one in this life come to the place to where they can say about the good, the bad, the what they have, what they don't have, the whole lot of their existence. Lord, it's enough. It's just right. I wouldn't change it for anything. I am where you have put me, and I'll be here as long as you intend for me to stay. I'll go at the appointed time. And joyfully leave saying, it's enough. I don't need any other words than that to express what I hope I believe. It's enough. Thank you for your time.